My name is Samantha Dorward. I am Sean's daughter. I go by Sam with two M's, so it's a little unique. All of us Dorwards try to think we're a little unique, but yeah.
A little.
And I hear my dad yell for my mom, and that voice isn't something you hear very often, so immediately I knew something was horribly wrong and that it was Taylor. And all we could hear was, "David, don't let them stop doing CPR." We just didn't know what we were about to walk into because they wouldn't give my dad an update either. We got there and they started kind of shuffling the four of us, my mom, my dad, my older brother, and I, into a room. And in my head, I assumed that they were giving us bad news because I was like, why wouldn't they just take us straight to Taylor? They're telling us all this stuff and we still don't know whether he made it or not. And then the lady finally said that they got a heartbeat after shocking him 5 times. But in that moment, it felt like I didn't have air. It felt like if the four of us, if he wasn't going to make it, if the four of us would just pass away too, then that would be okay. Just because the thought of living without him is just unimaginable. So they took him up to the ICU and they updated us and told us that they were going to cool his body temperature down to 90 degrees for 24 hours in hopes to preserve his brain, because they had told us that he had been without oxygen from anywhere. Some people have estimated, some of the EMTs and doctors have estimated anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. So they were cooling his body down to preserve his brain, because medically, if you're without oxygen for 10 minutes, you're usually brain dead. So we were just hoping that would just keep him alive. We weren't expecting any more than that. But so Taylor did open his eyes relatively quickly after they warmed his body up, but they also told us just because someone's eyes are open, that doesn't necessarily mean they're awake.
So as the days went by, little things started to change for Taylor. They took out the tube in his throat and gave him a tracheotomy, a feeding tube. At the time, it was like winning the lottery. I mean, it was, if he would just open his eyes or squeeze your hand a little spit, it was this overwhelming victory. And that in itself, I think, is part of the reason why we are where we are today. We immediately started to realize that those things, as maybe silly as they might seem, they were gigantic to us. And we started this little thing where we put a penny in a jar for every new thing that Taylor could do since the drowning event. And some days, I remember when the first penny hit the bottom of the jar, it kind of echoed around. It was pretty loud. That one penny is all it took to get past the first new thing.
There was a moment where, we had got a lot of hope. The one day my dad was in with Taylor, Taylor just opened his eyes and then was like, "Taylor, can you look at me?" And he slowly but surely turned his head and looked, and then the nurse saw that and got the doctor, and then he started to do a couple other things on command, like squeezing his hands or something, just very little things, but it was much more than we had seen. We hadn't seen anything done on commands. Any movement he did was involuntary, or what they called spontaneous movements. And we prayed with Taylor, and it was so comforting, even though there was such heartbreak. Just the unity that came together for him. I know it meant the world to my mom, especially in that moment. And then a few hours later, they met with Taylor's neuro team again. And
so they asked us to meet with the neurological team, and we got to the meeting. As he started to talk, I had to very bluntly interrupt him because he was speaking an entirely, I literally thought he may have been talking about a different patient. So I kind of got upset that he was misleading us because he was speaking a bit more optimistic than we were hearing that morning. And his opinion after 35 years in the field was that Taylor had a significant chance to have a life beyond a vegetated state. They completely admitted that they didn't know, what type of recovery he might have, or if any. Aside from that day, that Monday, we called the bad day, and July 4th, we just are the luckiest family on the planet because everything that has happened has been better than the day before. There has not been a day with one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes we feel a little guilty for that, seeing other people. But that's just how it has been. And we're fortunate and lucky and blessed and overjoyed for every one of those new days. He has pretty rigorous routine here. They started him, he couldn't walk, he couldn't sit up, he couldn't pinch his fingers, he couldn't touch his nose, he couldn't do a lot of things. Rest assured, day by day, he has made improvements. Some days small ones, but some days really large. And he has walked and he talks and he has some vision problems. He's not able to see right now, but we are not done fighting through that. We're going to keep pressing hard, not just from a hope, but from a science perspective. And he goes through all kinds of therapies. He wears a thing called a locomat, which is this robot that wraps around his legs, makes him look like Iron Man, to re-get his muscle memory. And just the other day, he was able to walk around the floor, the hospital floor, just pretty far, assisted, but with no walker, and the assistance he had was just because he can't see. But there's been no medicine involved in his brain healing. This has been just him and all of the, I'm a huge believer in the power of positive thinking, whether that's prayer or good vibes or smoke signals saying you rock. It doesn't matter what it is. I think from day one here, that day one through this for Taylor, that's what all of everyone has offered: support and encouragement. And even when he couldn't hear it, I know it mattered to him. And he sees it even today, even though he can't see it. I know he sees it.